everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of ARG Presents. I am Amigo Aaron, joined as always by the Gangster of Love and the Sultan of Swing, John Boat of Carshaller.
Hello, hello, hello.
So, if you watched last week, you'll recall that the Retro Roulette tasked us this week to play games from the Commodore 64 computer line. A little bit about the Commodore 64 for those that live under a rock. It is the largest selling budget PC of all time, if you discount the recently produced Raspberry Pi, which I think I read that it surpassed it. But I mean, that's kind of you're in an iffy area there with that. This console sold between 10 and 17 million units worldwide in its day, which is amazing. So this unit debuted in 1982. It was announced in January and it shipped in September. And at a price tag, and this surprised me, Bub, because this is known as the budget machine of its era. This released at a price of $595 US. In today's money, you're looking at $1,560.
Right.
Now, what's the key to that? 1 year later, it was cut in half, $300.
Well, you know, here's something I was reading today. I was reading up on the C64. Do you know what the total cost in parts of the C64 was?
I don't.
$147.
Really?
So even at half its original price, they were still making money.
Well, that was sort of Commodore's MO back in the day. And one thing that is interesting to know is that they produced a lot of their own chips because Trammell had cajoled and done everything he could to basically own these chip manufacturers.
He went out and bought the factory. Yeah.
That's right, and that is a whole other story. Something else I thought was kind of interesting was that according to Wiki and a few other sources I saw, there have been at least 10,000 commercial releases on the Commodore 64.
It's an unbelievable number.
Astounding amount. And yet from that incredible number, it is our job to talk about just two.
Narrow the field.
And I think we picked a couple good ones this week.
I think so.
So you want to lead us off this week? What do you got for us?
Aaron, this week we are going to be talking about Skate or Die. So Skate or Die was released in 1988 for the Commodore 64 originally, but it was later ported to the Apple II GS, the ZX Spectrum, the NES, DOS, the ST, and the Amstrad.
Wow, I didn't realize it got that many ports.
It got a ton of ports. Sadly, it got no Atari 8-bit port because Electronic Arts had dropped support for the 8-bit line a couple of years back. You know, that's one of the things that really separates the C64 from the Atari 8-bits. That was kind of its rival, but the C64 just simply outlasted it by years and years and years. The Atari, once they started the ST, they pretty much dropped their 8-bit line completely, but Commodore, never one to lose a moneymaker, continued pushing the C64 long after the Amiga's release.
With that amount of numbers that are out there, I can see why they would continue to support them.
Yeah.
And also the Atari did release several years earlier, and so by that time, I guess they just figured it was time to move on.
Right. This was published by Electronic Arts, and it was coded by three guys, Michael Kosaka, Stephen Landrum, and David Bunch. Something interesting about these guys, I looked multiple sites on the internet, and I could find no other games that these three guys worked on.
Now, now stop me if I'm wrong, because I know you did a lot of research for this, but I believe those guys all came over, at least some of them came from Epix.
They might have.
Because I know some of the guys that worked on this originally also worked on the game series for Epix.
Well, that certainly makes sense with this style of game, but you know how normally when you look on Lemon 64 and Moby Games, all of the coders and things are hyperlinked, so you can see what else they've done. Well, I clicked on these guys' names and nothing else was coming up. So.
But yeah, I know at least a couple of these guys worked for Epix on the games, and it does come through, I think, on that.
Yeah. The music was by Rob Hubbard, and he is storied in he's done many titles for the C64. Two that I chose to pick out were Action Biker. If you've ever played Action Biker, you've heard his tune over and over and over again.
But I've not played it. I have heard that tune.
And also he did the music for International Karate.
Yes.
So yeah, Rob Hubbard, a giant in the C64 scene.
Yeah, he's much ballyhooed. He's a very popular artist. And the tunes in this are really good.
Yeah. So what is this game? This is a skateboard simulation that is it borrows heavily from, like you said, the Epix Games series. You up to 8 players can compete in either one event or all 8 events. And you start out, but the thing that makes this game really cool is that instead of just starting out like the game series often does, where you just have a static screen with text on it and you choose your event that way, this game starts you off in a skate shop, okay? And you see this crazy looking middle-aged dude with a purple mohawk yakking at you. And you can choose a bunch of different options. This is kind of an interactive menu. You've got a cursor, which is a weird thing to have on the C64. And you actually move the joystick around with the cursor. And you can look at different things inside this skate shop. For example, when you hover over the posters, Rodney says, yeah, maybe one day you'll be on a poster, and there's a pugil stick up at the top that he says you use in the joust. There's also, instead of just having a thing that says register, there's actually a sign-in sheet, you know, and you click on that and you sign in, and that's how you compete. And so it's something that they didn't have to do. And it's something that makes this game sort of go above and beyond the Epix games. You could tell that they were trying to push the genre forward, and it's really, really cool. One thing that you can do in the C64 version that you cannot do in the NES version, and I'm going to be referencing the NES version several times over the course of this because that's the version I grew up playing. You can actually change your board color in this game. In the NES version, I don't believe you can, or if you could, I never did it. So that's kind of neat. The bad thing about the skate shop, and this is probably my #1 gripe with this game, I believe the best music in Skate or Die is the skate shop music. However, the skate shop music was not composed by Rob Hubbard at all. It was composed by some guy in Japan working for Konami, because this game was published by Konami and for the NES. Actually, it was published by Ultra, which was a subsidiary of Konami. But it's got this awesome shuffle, and there's none of that. There's no music in the skate shop in the C64 version.
I see. So in that case, that's one area where the NES outshines.
Right. But anyway, once you leave the skate shop, you can either choose to compete or practice, but regardless, you get presented with this overhead map of these destinations. This reminds me a lot of 720, how you actually have to skate to the different events. This is, the world in Skate or Die is not nearly as big as the world in 720. It's not a place where there's other things to do. You can't do tricks for money and things like that, but what you can do is you can go to all 6 events, 5 events, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 events, and so it's just a neat thing.
It reminded me of what was that game we played on the Amiga, Bushido?
Right.
And I think that was an EA title as well. I'd have to wonder if there was some crossover there.
Yeah. Anytime that you can avoid just select your event with the cursor, it's a good thing.
I liked it. I thought that was a good addition from the game series.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now, aside from Rodney and the player character, there are several other people that are in this game to greater or lesser extents. You have, of course, you have Rodney Recluse, who is or perhaps Recluse, spelled cool guy style. He's the owner of the skate shop. Then you've got Poser Pete, and Poser Pete is sort of your opponent in the joust if you are a novice player. Then you've got Aggro Eddie, who is the intermediate guy. And then finally, Bionic Lester, who is Rodney's son. And he's your opponent in both the advanced form of the joust and the downhill jam.
And unbeatable.
Yeah, he's very difficult. Yeah. All right, so there's the characters, there's the setting. Let's talk about the meat of the game, the events.
All right.
Okay. So the first event is the freestyle. Okay. This is probably I won't. It's probably my favorite event in the game. It's a half pipe. It's a rather large half pipe, it seems. What you do is you get 10 passes. You go back and forth and you do tricks. There is a high jump. The high jump, you have to 360 on the joystick to get higher and higher.
Brutal.
There is the race. It's a downhill cross-country race. You've got the jam, which is like it's a 2-person race that involves combat, sort of like Road Rash or something like that.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
And then finally, you have the joust, and the joust takes place in a drained swimming pool, and you basically you face off against an opponent with pugil sticks, like they use in the Army or American Gladiators, and it's your job to either avoid getting knocked off your board or to knock the other person off his board.
Yeah, I guess as I recall, every 3 passes, the stick goes from one guy to the other.
Right. So I thought that I'd talk a little bit about each one of these events a little bit more in depth. So the freestyle, there are a bunch of different tricks that you can do. This, in my opinion, there's a couple games that have a half pipe section. For example, I know that California Games has a half pipe, and I know there's at least one other game out there that has a half pipe as part of a mini game collection. This is the only one of those games that I can manage to do anything in. I think that however they set this up to make a control, it's immediately apparent what you have to do. To gain speed, you hit your button when you go into the more shaded sections of the ramp. You fly up in the air, you push a stick one way or the other way, you start to spin, you move up or down. It's easy to grab your board and go along the lip of it. You can do a hand plant where you go up in the air. There are several different spinning tricks that you can do. And I was able to do almost everything. I think that I could do every single trick pretty much on command, which is a rare feat. In California Games, I never really even managed to know what I was doing ever, and I've played that many, many times.
In California Games, this is what, it's almost like they said, okay, we did this in California Games, now we're going to really do it.
Right.
Because this is more like a proper game, in my opinion. And once you figure out how to gain speed, which it took me a while to figure, I had played this game years and years ago on the NES, but I hadn't played it for a long time. And so for a while, I just lumbered around. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember now. And it's neat to be able to do a lot of tricks. And something I thought was real neat or wacky is that when you sort of change directions as you spin down on the base of that thing, your guy really cuts an angle sometimes, and it's very visually wacky. And also, of course, many times my guy would fly off the side and be disrobed like Charlie Brown.
Exactly. I actually have that in my notes right here. Lose clothes, Charlie Brown style. So,
but yeah, this could have been a lot of PC games from back in this year. This probably could have been a game.
Right.
And just by itself, it was pretty good.
And one difference between this and the NES version is in this game you are only allowed to gain speed when you're in those shaded sections of the ramp. In the NES version, if you mash the button, you're going to be gaining speed the whole time.
Oh, maybe
so it's actually
much trouble.
It's a little bit easier to really get some good air in the NES version. But anyway, very solid event, the freestyle. Next is the high jump. This is the weak one in the pack for me. In this, you're basically, I think you get 3 passes. You rotate the joystick, and the faster you rotate the joystick, the higher you go. When you feel like you've done the best that you can, you hit the button and you go back up on the other side, you get off, that's the end of the event. And you're just basically trying to get how high can you go from one pass on the half pipe.
It's funny, I was not a super fan of this event, but of all the events, I probably did better at this one than I did the other ones because I had the Wicco. And that thing's perfect. It's the size, the signal is perfect for me to spin that sucker.
Oh yeah.
And like my brother, just go to work. I mean, I could hear that thing mashing up inside. This is much like Decathlon, so just the joystick destroyer.
Right.
But I had pretty good luck, and you could edge your board up there, hit the button at the right time, and kind of get a little bit higher. So
now,
it's kind of cool. I could almost jump off the screen, which I thought was cool.
This is one game where the C64 version is miles ahead of the NES version for 2 reasons. One, in the NES version, you have to tap a button. And I was never able to actually do anything. Like my button mashing skills are not the best, but they're not the worst. And the only way I could ever get anywhere is to take out my NES Max or my NES Advantage and push down that rapid fire button.
So you have to hit it like track and field.
No, I think it's just one button.
That would be tough.
Yeah. And the bad thing is that in the NES version, once you lose your momentum, you just settle to the bottom, and there's no way to get out. And so you have to physically reset the console to get out of that. So that's no good.
I mean, but yeah, this is probably the least imaginative.
Yeah. Now, I'll tell you what is cool about this, and also puts it ahead of the NES version, is that when you crash in this, did you ever crash in this?
No, I don't think so.
Your body physically disintegrates on the thing. It just splats you out. The NES version doesn't do that. It's very graphic. So that is the high jump. The race is probably second favorite. I really like the race. It is a sort of a cross-country race where you're going across all kinds of different terrain. You go over grass, you go over gravel, and there's multiple paths that you can take as you race down this thing. And there's ramps you can jump over water and things like that. There's a secret path through a pipe you can take if you duck down. It's really, really cool. And in all of the downhill events, you can choose between what they call regular foot and goofy foot. And regular foot is where the controls are basically down moves you down and up moves you up, and goofy foot is reversed. Now it's possible that that might be opposite. One does one and one does the other.
Goofy, I use goofy, and it's sort of right is your skater's right and left is your skater's left.
Okay.
That way it was easier for me to use goofy to do it. I will say that the race that was my favorite event. And I mean, don't get me wrong, the half pipe's pretty good, but the race was fun. The course was interesting. And there would be places I would go by, and I'd be like, "Hey, can you go up that? Is that there's this one point where you come down the path, and there's a ramp that goes up to this like building, and I didn't even know that was even part of the that you could go up there.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." I'm not great at it, but I thought it was the most interesting of the event.
And here's the thing that makes both the race and the jam interesting is that they are not just pure races who can get to the end of the fastest. You also can get points for doing various tricks. So you have to kind of weigh against yourself, is it worth it to go a little bit slower and rack up some more points doing some tricks going through the pipe and stuff like that? Or do I want to just use blind speed and try and get my highest score that way?
Yeah, because you can sort of angle your way through the course without taking a lot of chances. Like, you don't have to go off the ramp. You don't have to go over you don't have to go to the construction signs and or through the pipes and all that stuff. But yeah, and not to mention it's just a lot more fun.
Yeah.
Just going down that lame style it's lame.
It's no good.
Yeah.
Next up, we have another downhill event called the Jam. And this is probably
I hated this event, I'm not gonna lie.
This is probably the weakest one in the game, I think. It's a neat concept where it's another downhill race and you're racing against an opponent and you're going through a more urban environment. I think the downhill race is more kind of in the country, more like a park. This is more of you're in the middle of a city. And you've got to negotiate yourself through different gaps and fences. There's one point where you can go through somebody's yard and go under their clothesline, and you get points for crushing bottles, crushing cans with your board, which is a weird thing to be able to do with a skateboard.
Sounds like it would just kill you instantly if you did this. You get a little rock and knock you off.
Right. And you are up against an opponent. Lester is your opponent, and you also are tasked with trying to knock him off his board for points, and at the same time, he's trying to knock you off your board.
He's better.
He is.
I would wager this would be more fun with another human.
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to play with another person, but Lester's, he's just too tough. He's really tough.
But again, this is a game where you're always competing for score. So if you take your time a little bit, go through, mash some extra cans, take some hidden areas, you don't have to necessarily win the race to come out ahead in the points.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was okay. It was okay. It was not my favorite.
Right.
Because I was frustrated a lot.
Right.
The course is tough too. It's real tough. It's not like the other course. I mean, you get caught on a fence or something.
Well, the good thing is that the game will automatically, it's impossible to come too far behind because it's not a split screen deal. So the game will catch you up, but it docks your time.
Yeah, and you need caught up. I mean, gosh, I don't know what would happen. You never.
Yeah, it would just be over. You should just skate back home. And finally, you've got the joust. And this is a very simple exercise. You're basically on opposite sides of a swimming pool, if you can imagine, swooping down to each other. And the key on the defense is to kind of time the time where you start your descent with the time that the other person is far away from you, so you're able to sort of skate on opposite ends of the pool the whole time.
This is another one probably be more fun with two people.
Absolutely.
I have a vague memory of playing this with my brother, so we must have played it somewhere. It must have been on his NES back in the day. But again, this is okay, and this one I had at least a decent chance against the computer. But it was still tough.
Yeah.
I'm sure after a lot more practice I get better at it. But it was just, I think that's clever. What was the skating movie that was out in the 80s? Was it Thrashing or Thrashers?
That's
I believe
Thrashing. There has to be an apostrophe in it.
I believe that this was there was something like this in the movie. I haven't seen this movie for a long time, but I vaguely
They had to have
recall
gotten that idea from somewhere.
I don't know.
And definitely not real life, because there's no way that
People do
First of
stay
all,
in those pools.
first-
They do that.
Yeah, but first of all, like, do you see the size of that pool?
It's
The
a
size of that
good-sized
pool
pool.
is like it's like a football field. I don't know how, I don't know. If you're a skater out there and you use real pugil sticks in a swimming pool, let me know how that went, because I'm curious.
I would like to see that.
Yeah. So this game reviewed very well. I found 3 reviews from magazines from back in the day. ASM gave it an 8 out of 12. Not sure if that's accurate or not.
That is a weird,
Yeah.
a weird score system they got there.
Power Play and their issue gave it a 70, and Zap64 gave it a 92. So it reviewed pretty well, undoubtedly, because it is one of the classics on the machine. This game had some sequels. Okay, it was followed a couple of years later by a wintertime game called Ski or Die. Now, did you ever play that one?
I know it's out on the Amiga, and I do recall trying it out, and I don't remember liking it very much.
This game is garbage. It's no good. It doesn't have any of the charm of the original one. The events are mostly unplayable. It's unfair to say it's garbage. It's at the level of one of the games. Like, I think that by and large the events in this game control better than the events in the games. This sort of takes a step back, and it's sort of like winter games, but without all the fun. Because there's, aside from skiing and snowboarding, you can't really do a whole lot of other things. And the slalom game in Ski or Die is not as good as Slalom for the NES, which came out like 6 years before it. So it's no good.
Okay.
Now, this next game. Oh, and Ski or Die had a multi-platform release. As you said, it was even out on the Amiga. In 1990, Skate or Die 2 was released for the NES only. It was an NES exclusive. Okay, now did you ever play this one?
It seemed like I knew it existed, but I don't think I ever played it. I don't recall.
So they took a different tack with this one. It's a game with it's sort of 2 games in one. The first one is, the total name of this game is called Skate or Die 2 Double Trouble or something like that. The Search for Double Trouble. It's a weird title.
Yeah, that title's no good.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't copy the whole thing in there, but it's got a colon and extra words. The first mode is a side-scrolling adventure game, and it's sort of. It always kind of reminded me of Bart versus the Space Mutants, because you had to like skate on different things to make different things happen, kind of like how you're spray painting different things with Bart versus the Space Mutants.
Yeah.
It didn't control very well. I found it very hard and not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
However, the second part of the game, and I think this is where the Double Trouble comes in, it is a dual screen half pipe. So the half pipe actually scrolls as you're skating across it. So if you can picture the half pipe in Skate or Die stretched out over the course of 2 screens with a little pyramid ramp in the middle of it, like something that you might see on Excite Bike, that is the second part of the game.
That's really weird.
Yeah, and that part of the game's really good.
Has a pipe like that ever been made with a ramp in the middle?
That's a great question. I have no idea.
That seems ultra dangerous.
Yeah. I don't know.
What if you fall off the top and hit the middle of that peak? You're gonna get mauled.
Well, I mean, it's so far away. There's no way you could do that. But I guess what you could do is you're skating down, you hit that ramp in the middle, and it takes you almost to the end of that one. Like
you slam into the wall.
You can do that on the game, and it's really cool. So that part of the game is great. The adventure part, I'm not a fan.
What an odd concept. It seems like this is such a cut and dry concept. More events in the same genre, in the same vein as this, and then you're good to go.
If they would have put out a graphically updated version with different courses of this game for the 16-bit systems, it would have sold like crazy.
Yeah, you'd think.
Yeah. This game also had a couple of other sequels which I had no idea existed.
Okay.
This game had 2 Game Boy exclusives. So, of course, the Game Boy was a hot property in 1990. And we had Skate or Die, Bad and Rad.
Man, these names are horrible.
And that was just a platformer, just like the adventure mode, but even more of a platformer. Almost like, have you played Adventure Island before?
Yes.
You know, when you get the skateboard?
Yes.
It's that sort of a deal.
Okay.
And then you also have Skate or Die Tour de Thrash.
That also sucks. God.
And this was exactly like Skate or Die 2, where you have the half pipe mode. Oh no, I'm sorry, this is not like that at all. Forget that. Retro Rocket Ramp is the first part of this, and this is almost identical to the half pipe mode in Skate or Die 2. Okay, so you've got the good part of Skate or Die 2.
Yeah.
And then the second mode, get this, is called the Stale Fish Tour. Okay. And this is like a world championship event where you go to events all over the world, and you have these very long half pipe sections. So it's kind of similar to, the bonus stage in Sonic 2.
Yeah.
Where you're in that half pipe and you're collecting things and you're avoiding obstacles.
Yes.
It's basically like going all over the world competing in that.
Okay.
So very weird.
And these are on the Game
These
Boy.
were both Game Boy exclusives.
Okay.
So I never knew those existed. Kind of crazy.
That is bizarre.
Yeah. So on eBay, this is actually I was expecting this game to be a high dollar game.
Well, yeah, because it's in the classic
Right.
album style folding cover.
Right. And coming off a Mule, where that game regularly sells for over $100, you could get this one recently sold, complete in the 45 sleeve for $35.
Really?
Yeah.
That is surprising.
Very reasonable. And I looked up the NES version just because there was a sealed version of that sold for $110. So it's not cheap, but not crazy expensive for a sealed game.
I was just looking a few things up on this before the show, and there were two things I didn't realize. Well, one thing I realized, if you look closely at Rodney, and I don't think you mentioned this, he looks like Rodney Dangerfield.
Right, I didn't mention that. You're right.
And
No respect.
So stupid. And clearly he was a Marine because he's got a Marine tattoo. And the other thing I read is that Skate or Die was the very first in-house game that EA ever did. The very first EA produced game that they produced and distributed.
Really?
Yeah.
Because they'd been at it for forever by
right,
that point.
They didn't make their own stuff. This was the very first one. And of course, they brought in guys from Epix, but I don't know how many exactly of the guys that worked at this were from Epix, but they at least one. And this was so that's kind of neat that this was their very first title that they produced. Now they produce a zillion tons of titles.
Yeah.
But overall, I thought it was it aged well. Look, the Commodore 64 version looks good. It plays good.
I can't think of too many games that look and play this well on the system, on the C64.
It's smooth.
It runs so smooth and so fast, and it's so colorful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which sometimes the C64, that's sort of the knock on it. The Atari the Atari 8-bits are sort of the colorful machines, and these were sort of this quite had the sprites and whatnot. But I mean, it was nice. They did a good job, and of course the graphics, there's a lot of attention to detail.
Yeah. So anyway, just to wrap up, I love this game because it sums up sort of the 80s, with the fashion and the attitude and the skateboarding culture. It's just a nice throwback to that time, and the music is fantastic.
Let me ask you, here's the big question you didn't answer. Which do you like more, this or that CNC surf design game?
Oh, wait till we do the NES. That's going to be my first.
Do you have a preference of the two?
I probably like TNC Surf Designs more.
There it is.
TNC is
there it is.
It's one of my favorite games on the system, but this is a very solid title, and this is definitely more fun to play with two players. Yeah.
Fair enough.
All right, Aaron, it's time to move on to your title of the week, Forbidden Forest.
So, Forbidden Forest is I've heard a lot about this title, but it's the first time I get to sit down and mess with it. So this came out on the C64 in '83, and it was published by an outfit called Cosme.
Not Cosmic, as I thought it was a typo.
Cosme, yeah. They were a California-based outfit, and they've been around for a long time. They were around their beginning of the company sort of sketching, but they were out sometime before '82. And as of 2016, they were still active in the budget area of PC releases. Now, I don't know, I couldn't find anything in the past 2 years, but they actually had they bought another company in 2016, which that's incredible if you think about it. That's a long run. So to talk about this game, you really first got to get into the guy that made it. And the guy's name was Paul Norman. All right, now, Paul Norman is a pretty big name on the C64, but his story is just unbelievably bizarre. So, Paul is a musician, and he was in bands and played clubs and stuff in the 70s. And these are his own words. So in the 80s, in the early 80s and the late 70s, disco sort of dried up a lot of his work. A lot of these places became disco clubs and whatnot. So he was in a music shop one day and they had a VIC-20 for sale, and he bought one.
What a weird place to buy a VIC-20.
Yeah. And he bought one, took it home, and he taught himself how to use basic programming. And so he learned basic, and he made some various basic games, and he thought were pretty good games. And so he found an ad in the paper, and this is a sign of the times, that a place was looking for a game programmer. All right, so this is like in the one ads, wanted game programmer, right? So he went 30 miles. He rented a car. He took his basic programs in. They looked at them. They liked them. They said, "Hey, these are pretty good." And they were. He said, this is according to him, they ran so quickly they assumed he knew how to program a machine language. He's like, "You know how to program a machine language?" Paul was like, "Of course."
Huh.
They're like, "You're hired." All right. So he went to work for them, and so he worked there for about 3 months with a couple other guys. And according to him, there were two aerospace engineers that worked there. So
wow,
you can imagine
that's crazy.
They were programming these games. And then one day he was there by himself, and some people came in and started taking out the furniture. It was like, because the place he worked was like a 12 by 12 beige room, basically. That's where he worked. That was the headquarters of this outfit. And they came in, and he's like, "What's going on?" He's like, "Oh, we're buying all this furniture. This company's out of business."
Wow.
And by this time, I think he said he was halfway through making the game. And so he goes, and so they saw him there working, because and they were like, they saw what he was doing, and they said, "That looks pretty good. Let's talk." Because the people, ironically, amazingly, the people buying this furniture were another video game maker. Okay,
we want this furniture, man. It's got the good juju.
It was Cosby. They were the ones that saw him, right?
Wow.
So they took and looked at his stuff, and they said, "Listen, we like your stuff. We're going to call you back, and you can come work for us." And so they effectively, when they bought the furniture, they bought Paul Norman. They bought everything.
Just right with it.
Right? So so he went to work for Cosme. Now, Cosme didn't have a headquarters. I don't know what they were doing with the furniture.
That's the real question. Where did the furniture end up?
It was an outfit. Now, they had been around for a good while, and they put out a bunch of games. Just to name off some of their, and trust me when I tell you this, they've put out a lot of absolute budget junkaroo. All right, but excuse me, they put out some good stuff, including and some of these you've heard of. They put out the Slinky, which is a pretty big title. And
Yep.
Jagged Alliance 2, which I'd heard of that one.
Jagged Alliance?
Yeah. Super Huey 1 and 2, which, and some of these Paul Norman did. Navy SEAL was Paul Norman. Aztec Challenge, that was Paul Norman. So he could tell a lot of their big hits were his. They did Richard Petty's Talladega. I don't know how that one got in there. So they had some hits. But so they put him to work, and he just worked from his house. Because what he'd been doing was renting a car and driving back and forth to his job every day. They were just like, "Go home." Here, and they go home, take the C64 that they gave you, go home and finish your game. And so he went home and finished the game after he negotiated with these guys. And so getting back to him making the game is even more wacky, because he goes home originally to make this game, and he doesn't know how to program in machine language. And I did a little basic. Everyone's done a little. There's a giant leap between the two.
Giant doesn't even describe it. I mean,
he learned how to program while making Forbidden Forest.
Wow.
This was literally his exercise, and it's the first game it's the first piece of software he ever made in programming. Was Forbidden Forest.
It's unbelievable.
I know. Did you ever heard any of this before? So he presented this to the guys, and they said, the guy that owns Cosme was this guy. He had he was a big player, and this was just, he had a bunch of money making skills. They went to his house and they were demoing this, and they said when they first showed multiple planar screens as people literally audibly gasped.
Yeah.
They could not believe what they were seeing. And so he knew he was in business. So with all that background, let's talk about the actual game. So Forbidden Forest is a game where you are an archer, and you're in a forbidden forest, effectively a forest full of nasty stuff. You are armed with, like I said, bow and arrow. You start with 4 quivers of arrows, and you can sort of free roam in a circular way. Basically, whatever goes off stream comes back around.
Yeah, it loops around.
Right, and you have free roam through the forest. So and every level stuff attacks you. Okay, so in the first level, you're standing there, and this is sort of jarring if you don't know what you're playing. The first level, you're standing there, all of a sudden these spiders, these giant spiders, and the way you actually have full rotational, you got about 180 degree aim with the bow and arrow, right? I mean, probably not quite that, but close.
Pretty close.
And the first thing I learned, notch an arrow. Because I hit the button, he began to notch an arrow, it was a spider.
And then a spider ate your face.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you'll notice right away when the spider gets you that you bleed.
Oh, yeah, and it's not a short death either.
No,
it's a long, agonizing...
the dance of death, basically. In fact, this is the dancingest arch you've ever saw. I'll get to that in a minute. So you have to notch an arrow, and then you have to aim your bow, and then you fire it at the monster. In this case, the first monster is the spiders, and you shoot them. And when you shoot these spiders, they don't just disappear. I mean, they literally blood comes out of them. One thing about this game, it's an early example of gore.
Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of that game we did on the Amiga, Moonstone. It's just like the prequel to Moonstone in a lot of ways. So. And we should mention that when the level starts and it gets going, the music starts ramping up.
Yep.
The music, and it's also by Paul Norman, he did everything, is off the charts.
It is so good.
It's some of the best music you're ever going to hear on the C64. Just loved it. And I mean, I'd heard people talk about it. Oh yeah, but I mean, this music was so good.
And I'll tell you, this is when I first started playing this, I didn't have the sound on. I was listening to something else.
Yeah.
And I saw my archer, and he was grooving. And I was like, man, what's he listening to? So I turn on the music, and I start dancing, too.
Right,
it's great.
So once you dispatch the spider, and I think you take out a couple of them, you hear the song really ramp up, doom, 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 and your archer just starts going to work.
Yeah.
And Paul Norman said what he was doing there is he was displaying every type of graphic that the archer can do.
Oh, okay.
So all those little movements, all that crazy dancing, that's everything the archer, every possible look for the archer.
I do that same thing when I dance. I just think about every possible motion I could make.
Have you seen you dance? I believe you. And so the funny thing about this game, and I mean, this game is after I tell you this is the first game you did, you could understand that because there are some things that they're so goofy that a first-time programmer would do this and not think much about it. When you get killed, in most games you get killed, it's like you need to disappear. And we've mentioned he does the dance. He does a good 10-second dance, boom, 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 and as he's bleeding out, all right, and then instantly you're just back in the game. It's like that. You're like, holy crap! And then when he wins a level, he doesn't just go to the next level. Nothing changes, right? Except here he goes. He starts going to work, dancing. He dances for about 15 seconds before the level changes to wherever the next monster is. The next monster in this case are bees. Now, the bees level is one where the music sort of superseded by the actual sound of the bees, and it's awesome. It sounds just like a buzzing bee.
Right, a giant bee.
Something else this world has, if you look at this world, I mean, there's one world to describe it. It's blocky. It's a big, weird... The graphics in it, if you looked at a screenshot, you'd be like, what is this crap? But if you see it in action, it actually works in a weird way.
It's very similar to something like Minecraft, where it's very plain, but when you're in the world, it really is sort of immersive.
Yeah, and when you see that kind of multiple plane scrolling, it's quite amazing, really.
Yeah.
But in the second level, these bees will come out, and the world has depth. You can't, for those on the package, you can't see me using my hand to show death, but they come out and they get bigger.
Right,
you know?
there's sprite scaling on a console or on a computer that could not do sprite scaling.
Now, well, I mean, this is not Nintendo level, but I mean, they kind of
that's the effect is what effect of sprite scaling.
And then if you practice, you can practice kind of aiming your bow to kind of get this
you can get a beat on it.
Right, and it works in a weird way. It works.
Yeah.
And so the bees I thought the bees were kind of tough. They weren't the toughest, they were kind of tough. And when you get stung with a bee, again, death, you get the blood and the death. And when you knock the bees out of the sky, they just kind of hit the ground. I have to describe this stuff because it's like Dragon's Lair. Sometimes the deaths are so funny; they've got to be mentioned. So the next level are these giant frogs. The giant frogs. It gets dark. We should mention that as you play this game, day becomes night, and night becomes
and that's
super
one of the
black
things
night.
that happens when he's dancing. That's where the day-night cycle occurs.
And there's also a big sort of skull-faced moon, and it comes across the horizon, which is, again, these are things that are just there. They just add to the ambiance. So the frogs, you shoot these things, but even if you shoot them, if they're in your way, they'll just come down, and when they come down on you, they just smash you.
It's the end, right there. There's no dance.
There's no dance for that one. You just are mush. So if you knock a couple of these frogs out, and the best thing to do on that level, as far as I went, was just to try to move out of their way, and just as soon as you get a spare moment, notch an arrow and try to just randomly shoot a couple, and you might get lucky. So after that, you've got the dragon. Now, it's funny, I was watching your playthrough on this, and I was like, man, how lucky did you got so lucky on some of these kills. I
know.
So the dragon comes from way off in the distance. You can see him. It takes a little while for him to show up. Some of this stuff, a lot of times, doesn't show up right away. There's times where you're looking through the woods like scared to death. Like,
it's happening? Almost like a survival horror game.
It is. And then here comes the dragon flying in from the distance, and he'll come in and he'll fry you.
Yeah.
And your guy's on fire dancing. Oh God, which the dance is more legitimate right there. I mean, he's on fire. But if you kill the dragon, it's so awesome. The dragon flies out of the sky he falls down like a cement block and just burns. You're like, yes. And then the happy dance goes on. So, and I'm very satisfied. Now the next level is. Man, I died so much. I had put infinite lives on because I could not get past this. Admittedly, I couldn't get past it. It was the stupid. It's the skeleton and phantom
and the
level.
Phantom, yep.
Or some people call it the wizard. So on this level, the skeleton men sort of diagonally come at you with these spears. And it's sort of like the spiders, except they've got longer range and they're quicker.
They're fast.
Yeah. And you can shoot them, and it's great. You feel like $1 million, but the problem is the level don't end because off in the distance there's this like specter, almost looks like a grim reaper hovering around, and like underneath. The way they've got the level set up, it's sort of he's behind one of the planes and in front of another one. It's a cool effect. And so what you've got to do is, when he appears, you've got to nail him with an arrow while avoiding the skeleton.
Right. The skeleton is immaterial. You do not have to defeat the skeleton.
But the skeletons are. I got killed by those things 1 million. I just about said, heck with this. I was just like, man, I can't get past these guys. And I'm sure there's a trick to it that I don't know.
Well, I think that a lot of this game is luck. I would play through this. I played through the whole game 2 or 3 times, and sometimes I would have no trouble, but there would be other times where I'd get stuck on the spider stage and I'd be there forever. So.
Yeah, that can be tough. But this level is the one that really got me. That much said, I can't tell you how creepy it is when you finally shoot this guy. He makes this noise that it is the creepiest tone. It's just one long tone, and it is so creepy. This guy, you see him in the background sort of fizzling as the tone goes on. I bet it lasts 30 seconds. It's like a scream or something. It is creepy. I thought that was, I got chills.
You know what it reminded me of is the Banshee in Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
Well, there was a Banshee-like scream. I mean, I think that was the creepiest thing until the end of the game. But that was another thing. Again, brilliant. It was brilliant. If you'd said, at this point I just want a long tone that goes for 30 seconds, I'm like, you're nuts. And you're going to dance while this is going on.
Right.
But man, it is creepy and that thing fizzles out. So I mean, that's great. So then you've got the snake. Now the snake is another very clever effect done by Paul, where you don't see the snake right away. But then the snake's head comes, and the upper part of the snake comes up, and he's behind that first level of vegetation, and he strikes.
Right.
And what he does is he spits like venom at you, and when it hits you, the guy just melts. Just melts to the ground. There's no dancing. He's just gone. And it's an awesome effect, and it looks cool. The sound of the venom is cool. It's just cool, and the snake looks awesome. And when you kill the snake, the head just kind of flops over, and then just a gush of blood just comes out of the snake. It's delightfully violent.
It is very graphic for a C64 title.
Yes, I mean, he bleeds a ton. It's really cool. I mean, and it's a neat effect. And then the king of this game, and again, not knowing how this was going to go the first time I played it, I couldn't believe how many different things there were.
Yeah.
I was like, man, it's like all these different levels. The last guy was, I mean, just freaking awesome. So the game gets quiet, and it's really dark, and you see occasional strikes of lightning, right? And you're just wandering around, and then a lightning strike hits, and you catch a glimpse of something out in the distance. And this something is the Demogorgon, which
very famous these days.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, because of Stranger Things, but this predates that by a long shot. Of course, I'm sure he was flipping through a D&D guide or something.
Right.
So the Demogorgon, it's hard to explain what he looks like because I didn't get a real good look at him until the very last look you get. But he's just this creepy guy, this entity, and he'll appear like up in a tree or something, or like behind a bush, and you just barely can see him, and you only see him when there's lightning. And I noticed that there are these stars that will sparkle. Did you notice that? And they'll shimmer in the background. The sky in this part is the darkest. The whole area is as dark as it can be when this happens. And the lightning effect is really creepy. This scene right here is the creepiest in the game.
Right, absolutely.
Where you see this thing approaching, and you know it's coming. And I didn't time this, but I read that you've got like 30 seconds to hit this guy, and you only have a minute time frame to launch that arrow at him, and you have to time it perfectly to get him. I watched your playthrough. You're the luckiest I've ever seen. Just random as heck.
It's all skill, baby.
But I had a heck of a time getting this guy. But I mean, and if you don't get him quick enough, he basically comes out. He takes up the whole screen with his face, and you're done. It's over for you. But I mean, it is so well done. It's unbelievable. And when you finally kill this guy, Paul Norman's motto must be, "There can't be too much of a good thing," because this guy shoots fireworks off. It was like 30 seconds of continual
Well, it's the end of the
fireworks.
game. I mean,
it is.
How many games have we played or seen where the end? That's it. You know, at least this gives you something.
You're right. I mean, it is an epic ending. Of course, there's the dance, there's the music, and then it loops over and you start again. I couldn't tell you how impressed I was with this. The whole game was a tour de force for the music, the way they visualize the forest, the darkness, the light, the monsters. I mean, I just like every single part of this. I'm as surprised. This is about the same feeling I had when we looked at the Moonstone game. Just like came out of nowhere. I mean, I'd heard people talk about this game and the music, but it blew me away with how good it was. It also has 4 difficulty levels. I didn't try anything but the easiest one. I don't know how hard the other ones get. I would wager that if there's a bunch of skeletons on the screen at once or spiders, I don't know how you could possibly survive that stuff. Paul mentioned in an interview that he had gotten some of the monsters. They were inspired by a film, and I've never heard of any of these. Maybe you have. Well, I've heard of one. I haven't seen it. Night of the Demon. You ever seen that? Jason and the Argonauts, which I absolutely have seen.
Is that one of those Ray Harryhausen?
That's right. That's right. And it was awful good. And then Mysterious Island. I may have seen that one too. So there was a sequel to this. Believe it or not, it was released in '95. Norman did it as well. But admittedly, he says it was okay. He was proud of some of the stuff, but it was basically sort of like You Can't Go Home Again,
right?
Sort of affair. Believe it or not, there was another sequel, Forbidden Forest 3, released for the PC in 2003. I don't know anything about this, and I don't think he had anything to do with that one at all. So this game was pretty popular when it came out. It got 4 out of 5 stars. And was amongst the top favorite games at Zap. It was a very popular game. I didn't get a lot of stuff, but it got an 82%. It was, it's outlived. I mean, it's a classic. It's considered a classic. It makes a lot of lists. Some people can't quite get past the graphics, but I think they need to have another look, frankly, because
Yeah.
this is one of those games where the graphics don't tell the tale.
I had no problem with the graphics at all in this.
Yeah. I looked on eBay to see what this was going for, and I found one of these for sale in the U.S. I was surprised. $25 boxed, which I almost hit the button. If I hadn't just spent so much money on a furnace, I was like, man, and then even more tough for me to resist, someone had an awesome poster. The cover for this thing is really cool. It shows a guy getting ready to shoot a monster, and all the monsters are there, and the forest is in the background. It looks sort of German looking to me, and I wanted it bad. I almost pulled the trigger on that too. There's posters for sale too for it. So, but overall,
it's funny, on the cover of the game, your archer is shirtless, but in the game he's very fully clothed, including a jaunty cap.
Yeah. So, I kind of thought maybe he had like a beret.
Yeah, you know, that's what I picture it as.
But overall, you were digging it.
Loved it. Yeah. Loved this game.
It was awesome. I was real pleased with this one. So that's that. It's a good game, and I recommend it if you haven't played it. I mean, it's worth just watching a video just to experience it. To be honest with you.
Yeah. All right, Aaron. It's come to the time in the show. Has it not come to the time in the show? Okay, you gave me a weird look like there was a segment I forgot.
I'm a weird-looking guy, Bo. Okay. I'm not going to lie to you.
We're going to pull out the retro roulette wheel.
We're going to pull out some roulette. That's a tough thing to say.
I'm going to let you say it from now on.
Retro roulette?
Yeah. So here we go. From behind the depths, we have center it just so.
Nice.
Zoom in. All right, so last week we added arcade classics. This week we are taking out Commodore 64. We have managed to free the C64 thing from its place.
Everything went as normal.
And this week we are going to add to the wheel Chat Choice.
Ooh.
So, in case you did not know, we film ARG Presents live every week on YouTube. And if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can click the bell and that will give you a notification of when we are taping. So if Chat Choice comes up in the on the wheel, then we will do a quick poll in the chat room and they will decide which one of these systems we will cover. So, Aaron?
Power to the people, Bo.
There we go.
All right,
spin the wheel,
make the deal. Here we go. Oh, that was a good one this week. All right. Let's see what we get here. And we have, what do we have? The ColecoVision. All right.
All right. So,
how is that possible with the wheel?
Yeah, well, there's a little play in it, but that was where it's supposed to be. All right, so next week we will do
the envelopes.
ColecoVision, and Aaron is getting the envelopes now.
All right, let's
decide
see what we
which
got
games we will play.
ColecoVision. There it is, along with the next envelope. And now we will reveal the games. Gosh, I have no idea. Do you?
No, it's been too long.
This one's yours. I guess I'll choose first this week. Boy, this is a tough choice. I'm going to go with Smurfs.
Oh,
Smurfs.
Okay. I will choose the arcade classic Ladybug.
Ladybug. Okay, interesting. I have not played that one that much.
Yeah, I have not played the ColecoVision version.
Well said.
But I'm sure it's going to be fun.
I guess that's it then. Tune in next week to see Smurfs and Ladybugs. It's going to be a cute episode, Bo.
Absolutely.
I may come in cosplay.
You should.
Yeah, I think it'll be good.
Are you going to be the Smurf or the Ladybug?
Maybe I'll be both. Maybe I'll be a Smurf riding a Ladybug.
That would be great.
So tune in next week to see that with that visual in your mind. And until then,
adios.
Aaron and John making a new podcast. ARG presents.